exercise versus driving while...
I've written less driving while intoxicated for drugs than I have alcohol.
Oh, another thing I learned is driving while impaired. I think there's a reason for that.
Well, there could be. I can't tell you the reasons that people choose to use whichever drug they choose to use.
I can tell you what I was told about how it goes. The reason for it is there isn't a simple test like going to a bad boy. They have to take you to a medical facility.
Not anymore.
That's not true. I could go on for days about driving while intoxicated, but that's not what we're here to discuss.
Could I add one quick point to that?
Real quick.
So, I don't think anyone's here advocating that people should be allowed to drive intoxicated on whatever substance. If you want to enforce driving while intoxicated laws, absolutely, that's fine. That is the point where someone's use of something is now starting to endanger other people.
Right.
That is a law that makes sense to enforce. Absolutely enforce it, but you don't have to lock people up for the simple use of it because of that.
Hang on just one second. There was a gentleman here that had a question. Go ahead.
Yes. Jeff Baggett from Springfield. Hi, John. To address your topic there about the gateway drug, can you talk a little more about that? I mean, myself, I think the gateway drug, marijuana is not a gateway drug. I think the real gateway is the stoner culture that goes along with a lot of people associated with smoking pot. Okay, because we all know, every one of us knows somebody, our friends and family, that live a productive life, that smoke weed every weekend. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're pharmacists. They're not stoners. Okay? There's a big difference. I think your gateway is the stoner culture, not the weed.
Mr. Bromance, Mr. Corey will be next.
My thing was that he was saying that, that if you try weed, you're going to try something else. But like he said at a party one time, one of his own buddies passed him something with PVC in it. People are going to do that. It's not because people want to try something else. I smoke pot, I got to try coke now. No. People are going to do this because maybe they're not selling pot. Maybe they have some coke. They're wanting to sell their coke. They're going to hook you on whatever they're going to hook you on because that's their job as a dealer. Like this man back here said, on everything, rings on. He don't want his kids going out on the street and that happening to them. He wants to be in a store to where they know they're buying marijuana. They're not buying laced anything.
I'd like to address the gateway issue, and not really from any sort of statement about the nature of marijuana at all, but about the argument itself, what we call a logical argument. The gateway theory is an example of a logical fallacy that was known to the Greeks and Romans. It's called post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means before. It means happening after, therefore happening because of. The gateway argument is guilty of that fallacy. As my friend Mike just pointed out, there's a simpler way to put it. Correlation does not mean causation. That's a simpler way to put it. Correlation means two things happen together. Certainly, people that have used or will go on to use cocaine and harder drugs will have started on marijuana because we can say that was the gateway illegal drug. Had marijuana not been illegal, we could have said milk was the gateway. Milk did not cause anyone to smoke or do anything. Just because it happened before doesn't mean it happened because of. If marijuana had been a legal drug, then we would have had to call something else at this time a gateway drug. Everybody, I'm a firm believer in free will. Under no circumstances, psychologically, that I've ever been under, that I've ever found myself under, and there have been a lot of them, have I ever been caused to do anything that I wouldn't have done anyway. You can say it lowers inhibitions. All just as alcohol does. Dimming the lights probably lowers inhibitions. I sold alcohol for 10 years at the Deer Path Inn, which was a pretty nice little bar. I had a family called the Shepherds who came in from around the desert, and they were drinkers, hard drinkers. This is the early 70s, 71, 72. They would smear excrement on the walls in the bathroom. They would pick fights with people. My mother, who at the time was 60-some years old, dreaded seeing them. They'd come in drunk after the drive-in theater got out. That was when drinking and fighting at the drive-in was as common as having a cup of coffee in the morning. When they would, a change came over them. Their hair grew longer. They started, instead of ordering alcohol, would order oolong tea. They'd order sandwiches like Westphalian ham with hot and sweet mustard and smoky cheddar cheese on pumpernickel bread. And they'd play Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues about 30 times in a row. They quit drinking alcohol and started taking marijuana. I asked my mother what she thought about that. She was 65 and never didn't know what was going on. She said, "Those boys sure have improved, haven't they?" It was at that time that I told her, I said, "Mom, marijuana not only should be legal, it should be mandatory." I'd also like to, just a second, I'd like to read these are on sale at Town and Country, Scientific American, this month's February issue. The headline, it's written by the editors, "End the Drug Wars, Research Bans." All these gentlemen have been talking about research about marijuana. The problem with that is, let me read this and then I'll be quiet. It says, national laws and international conventions put a stop to all research of marijuana and other substances. The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 declared that these drugs have no currently accepted medical use. That's a quote from the Act. And classified them in the most stringently regulated category of controlled substances, Schedule 1. That's where heroin is. Marijuana is in the same drug category as heroin in the national. It's so absurd it makes me just want to shout from the rooftops. The resulting restrictions create a de facto ban on their use, meaning the drug's use, in both laboratories and clinical trials, setting up a catch-22. These drugs are banned because they have no accepted medical use. But researchers cannot explore their therapeutic potential because they are banned. So the laws themselves prohibit certain researchers. My drug is Diet Coke here. It prevents people from studying, scientists studying marijuana, so you can begin to start saying, here is a cause, here is an effect. There's one longitudinal study, 25 years long, it's been done in New Zealand. It showed that teenagers smoking pot lose IQ points about 8 points. It doesn't take into, that study is so flawed in so many ways that, because the variables are not controlled. But it's the only study that has been, that's out there, that has been referred to by the people that put out the anti-drug propaganda, what we call boilerplate stuff. Reefer madness mentality. Well, okay, that's it.
Okay.
Hang on. I was sorry behind you. I just got a question. You said you worked at a head shop. What do you do now for a living?
I'm a salesman.
You're a salesman?
Itinerant salesman. From time to time.
All right, and then you worked at a head shop years ago selling
I
all
ran a
the...
chain of 15 head shops, I was the boss.
Did you put that in your
And
resume?
you got out of that business to be a salesman?
Big question.
I got out of that business because I had a son who was going to be going to school. There were two people involved here, my partner, so to speak, also had a son about the same age. And we looked at each other one day and said, hey, you know what? I don't want my kid going to school and telling everybody, yeah, my daddy runs the head shops in town. So we decided to get out of it and go into one of the businesses.
Well, I think everybody feels the same way about
That's
their
why.
children when it comes time.
Now,
You know,
the
when
reason
you
I
have your
went
kids.
that's what I.
I'm just making sure you're not thinking you're a doctor or something, because now you're, you know, smoking everything. You've even done more drugs than I've ever done.
Mr. Miller?
Must have came in the head shop.
I'll try to be more brief than some have been. I just want to make a comment about the fact that there have been so many testimonies about how medical marijuana works for people. And I think it's pretty evident that it works for people, because there are now 20 states in the United States that have medical marijuana laws.
21, actually.
And plenty of testimony here, and tons of other anecdotal evidence. And one girl mentioned the fact that pharmaceutical companies haven't really addressed marijuana, but as a matter of fact, there is a company in Great Britain called GW Pharmaceuticals who got permission from the British government to develop their own strain of cannabis that has high levels of the two cannabinoids that they know are the most beneficial, and that's THC and CBD. And their strain of marijuana, they extract it, and they call that medicine sativa, and it's and they sell it in I think every country in Europe now uses sativa for
Legal for muscle spasms, isn't it?
exactly. Muscle spasms and neuropathy. And it's in the stage 3 trials here in America for cancer pain. It also just received what they call orphan status for to go straight to human trials for children with Dravet syndrome, which is an extreme form of epilepsy. And so there are pharmaceutical companies going after developing this drug. The difference between the pharmaceutical company and some of the people who sell the oils and other marijuana products in our 21 states that have medical marijuana laws is that company's going to charge you $1,500 a month for their drug, and those clinics in those other states may charge you $250 or in that range, depending on your needs. So the fact of the matter is, why should we leave that development to pharmaceutical companies when we can we can do it ourselves? Even though we know cannabis has a lot of medical benefits, I believe that cannabis has a medical benefit just being used recreationally.
There's someone over here.
I'm sorry, but the pharmaceutical companies, I have someone close to me that's a veterinarian, and they really are out for profit. They're not out to really make it better for us. We can do our own thing by having marijuana available to us, because we can do it ourselves. We don't have to be dependent upon them, and that's what they don't want.
Okay, one more thing I'd like to say is, I'm a smoker of cigarettes too, and marijuana smoking to me will help my cigarette habit, because when I smoke marijuana, I don't smoke near as many cigarettes.
Hear, hear.
So it helps and the same with the pain. I don't have to take near as many pain pills as long as I have my marijuana. But, so, that's where I like to say it does help me in that sense. So.
1 second.
All right, I have a question. Isn't it true that since that marijuana has been legalized in Colorado, that teenage marijuana use has dropped since it's been legalized?
Is that a question for me, because I don't know the answer?
For anyone who wants to answer.
I believe that, yes, it has. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's only been, now this is, it's only been legal in Colorado to use and possess for the past year. Well, and to grow 6 plants homegrown. The legal market has only been operating since the beginning of January. But actually, I mean, I think it stands to reason that that should reduce use more than anything, because that means that the black market is being slowly eliminated. A lot of these stores, the stores that were open on New Year's Day are not nearly all of the stores that are going to be open. They had a backlog of licenses they had to process. But I think it's going to eliminate that black market where people selling on the black market are not carding. That's not something that happens. But I'm not saying that teenagers are not going to be able to get their hands on it. I mean, they're going to be able to do things that are not good to them. That is the defining characteristic of teenagers, in fact. But it's a little bit more of a hassle to go and I got to stake out this place and find somebody walking by that's 21. I mean, I both used cannabis and drank when I was a teenager. Probably a lot of you did. And I mean, if you remember anything at all about which one was harder to get, it was always alcohol. That involved the whole day of sitting around like, all right, what are we going to do to get this?
Mr. Hemphill?
Yes. Of course, I live here in Piedmont, and I go to First Baptist Church. I'm a Christian. Okay, I state that right straight off the bat. My wife gets all these prescriptions that some guy makes up in a lab in a white coat, okay? That's legal. But yet, what God puts in the ground is illegal. Now, you tell me where that is.
I'd like to just add one sentence to what he had to say about Christianity. A great man said, it's not what goes into you that defiles you, it's what comes out of you.
The area. My name's Carrie. I believe that prohibition of marijuana actually was the reason why my dad was killed when I was 8 years old. I lost my father because he was in so much pain, but he was a semi-truck driver. He couldn't smoke pot. That's what he really wanted to do, but he was able to function. He turned to drinking.
So sad.
And I lost my dad because he was trying to drive home under the influence of alcohol. When he could have smoked his joint and sat at home and felt a little bit better, he could have went out on the road and during his couple hours of rest, he could have smoked his pot, felt better, and been able to drive. Prohibition killed my dad.
I don't know, the gist of this seems to me, over this meeting and the last meeting I went to, that the negativity problem seemed to be around the illegality.
Right.
The paranoia, the having to do things you wouldn't normally do if it was legal. So, geez, it just seems like it's another...
So if you support prohibition, you support organized crime.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Go ahead.
John, where are we at in the process right now? Are we currently polling on the initiatives?
We are polling. It's taking a little bit longer because the polling firm is harder to get harder to set up the actual beginning of the process because they didn't respond to emails for a while, which is annoying. But we are polling now, and we should have it done in a couple of weeks. But I would say that if you're not familiar, we filed initiatives with the Secretary of State. We got our ballot language back on all of them about 2 weeks ago. And now the reason that's important is because that is what voters would actually look at when they go into the voting booth and see, shall marijuana be legal? Here are the provisions of it. And that's what if you're going to do polling on it to assess if it's viable or not, you want to have that exact language. Because, you can ask people generically, do you support legalizing, regulating, and taxing cannabis? And they'll give you an answer, but you'll inevitably lose some support with the specifics of the ballot measure because, when